From the Senate, joining me now is Democrat Jim Hines on the Financial Services Committee and Republican Marsha Blackburn, Vice Chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Jim Hines. I mean, there is a rising sense of tension now, if not outright terror, that because of this intransigence, particularly the part led by Ted Cruz and these 40 renegades and Republicans, as many see them, that there may not be a deal, that the debt ceiling deadline may come and go, and we could face a form of financial Armageddon. Is this likely?
Well, it's hard to say at this point. Look, we're at the tail end of a 15-day period that was kicked off by Senator Cruz with, around this idea that he had any probability, or that the Republicans had any probability at all of repealing the Affordable Care Act. It was never going to happen. Set aside the question of whether it should happen. It was never going to happen. Today, this morning, we actually had a deal being hammered out between the two Senate leaders. The House Republicans stepped in and said, wait, we've got a bill that we're going to put forward. And, of course, that came apart as the day progressed and into the evening. So now we're back where we should have been all along, with a very clean deal. We don't know what it looks like yet, but that would raise the debt ceiling and avoid the prospect of default, and of course get the government started again. So we just have to keep our fingers crossed that in the Senate that deal gets struck.
Marsha Blackburn, let's talk about Ted Cruz for a moment, because he's the man of the moment, good or bad, depending on your view. He's clearly, it seems to most impartial observers, making a bit of a dash to be a front runner for the Republican nomination, perhaps, in 2016, and that's his real agenda here. But what's good for Ted Cruz and his personal political career might be disastrous for the American people, if not his own party. What is your view of his behavior?
Well, I think that one of the things we all should do right now is not talk about personalities. What we should be talking about is how we make certain that we get this nation on the track to fiscal health and responsibility. And one of the things we cannot do is continue borrowing $2 billion a day to keep the lights on. And regardless of whether we like someone or don't like someone, what we have to realize is we've been through a process of people who were elected by their constituents to come to D.C. and express the point of view, and so many of us have constituents who say, look, jobs, the economy, getting us on the road to fiscal health, returning us to where we are going to see jobs growth, where we're going to see economic growth. That is item number one. Dealing with the impact of Obamacare on the economy. That's an important thing to do. And Piers, we come, everybody bringing their best ideas and their best thoughts. And what we have right now is another deadline. I wish we weren't here, but we are.
But Marsha Blackburn, the problem is it may be the best idea and the best thoughts for you and for Ted Cruz, but like I say, these best ideas and thoughts might be absolutely catastrophic ones for the American people and the global economy. At what point does the outright selfish self-interest of Ted Cruz and his colleagues outweigh the American interest and the global economic interest?
There again, I think that what we don't do is talk about personalities as we're up against.
Marsha.
No. What we have to do is say, how do we deal with the debt ceiling and the debt? No, this is what we need to put in.
Marsha, Ted Cruz doesn't stop talking about
the American people want us to get this dealt with. We didn't want a government shutdown. We don't want to have a default on the debt. What we are doing, what House Republicans have done, is we have passed 4 different continuing resolutions and a budget. And,
let me ask
look at it like this. 28 bills we have passed since they last took their votes.
You've been unbelievably irresponsible, which is why the government's been shut down for 2 weeks. Let me ask you this.
Well, we wish it weren't shut down.
Well, I know you do, but sadly it is, and it's down to Ted Cruz. Let me ask you this, Marsha Blackburn.
Yes.
Obviously, you didn't want the government shut down, but it has shut down. But it already has for 2 weeks. Do you want the debt ceiling to run into default? Are you prepared to take that risk?
Absolutely not.
So what will you will you be doing as a party to avoid that?
I continue to work with other Republicans in the House to see if we can find a resolution to this issue. We did not want to get right here to the last minute. What I want to see is us work through a plan so that we're dealing with our long-term fiscal issues. borrowing the amount of money that we are borrowing every day is not a sustainable position.
Let me go back to Jim Himes.
Every economist around here tells us that.
No, every economist around here tells me what is going on is utter nonsense and should never have been able to get this far.
But the borrowing is a part of that nonsense.
No, there are many issues to do with Obamacare and the American economy and all sorts of things. What you don't do is shut the government down over what is a law. Let me turn back to Jim Himes. I mean, look, you know, you can take a view about this. It's all Ted Cruz's fault and so on. Or you can say politically, for him and the Tea Party element of the Republicans, he seems to be holding all the cards, playing them very adeptly, making himself extremely famous and probably, as I say, a front runner for a presidential run. But how do we get to a stage where President Obama, who so far has not managed to stop this shutdown and is on the brink of this awful debt ceiling deadline elapsing, how is he going to get into a room and make people see sense? At the moment, you have to say he has not shown great leadership, because if he had, he'd have got this sorted.
Look, it's you know, the president doesn't legislate. He signs laws that are sent to him by the Congress of the United States. And despite what Marcia is saying, you know, there has been nothing salutary about what has happened in the last 15 days. It has been devastating for our economy, throwing people out of work. The economists will tell you that the kind of, you know, management by crisis that the Republican Party in the House has demanded for years now has probably cost the economy 1 million jobs, far more jobs than they can point to credible source as suggesting that the Affordable Care Act is damaging. And by the way, forget about the jobs and everything else out there that is hurting the American people. It's devastated the Republican political fortunes. 74% of Americans disagree with how the Republicans have handled this. So if we're really going to talk about what the American people want, the American people don't want this country to be managed from crisis to crisis with government workers or Head Start programs or military contractors being used as negotiating tools in some absurd political fantasy.
And that is why we continue to pass bills and send them to the Senate.
Wait a moment. Let me play you a clip. Let me play you a clip from President Obama talking about Speaker Boehner today.
Speaker Boehner, for example, him negotiating with me isn't necessarily good for the extreme faction in his caucus. It weakens him. So there have been repeated situations where we have agreements, then he goes back, and it turns out that he can't control his caucus.
This is the problem, isn't it, Marsha Blackburn, is that President Obama doesn't know who to talk to. Does he talk to Speaker Boehner, the de facto representative of the Republican Party, or should he go straight to Ted Cruz, cut out the middleman, go to the guy that's wielding the power, that's shut down the government, that's threatening the default?
Well, it's amazing to me that the president would think that he should not be talking to Speaker Boehner. And it is up to the president as the commander-in-chief and the leader to assemble people at the negotiating table. I would remind you, Piers, that over the last 40 years or so, we've had 53 lifts to the debt ceiling. 27 of those have yielded spending cuts to what our nation spends. All of those have been negotiated with some type of policy reform. And we have talked about this previously on your show. Standard operating procedure in dealing with budgets and continuing resolutions and debt ceilings has been for one side to take their plan, the other side to take their plan, to meet at the negotiating table and to work this out. It has been a blatant lack of leadership that has been on full display for the world to see, that we have a president who has chosen that he would rather see a shutdown than go to the table, who is waiting until the last day to meet everyone at the negotiating table. That is unfortunate. It is something that I wish had not happened. We have continued in good faith to pass a budget every year, to send it to the Senate, to pass appropriation bills, which is the way we fill out our budget, send them to the Senate. It is the Senate that chooses not to take the action. That is Harry Reid's choice and decision.
Okay,
and we would prefer that it not have happened.
Final word to Jim Himes. It's all the Democrats' fault, nothing to do with Ted Cruz, nothing to do with the Republicans. In fact, lay it all at the White House. It's all their fault.
No, look, it's absurd, and there's very few Americans who believe the story that this is the president's fault. John Boehner, at any point in the last 15 days, could have opened up the government by passing the clean Senate CR, and the Republicans. And look, tonight Marcia is talking about the debt and a long-term deal. And by the way, we agree on that. We should negotiate that. But remember, 2 weeks ago, it had nothing to do with negotiations of the long-term debt. It was about a repeal of Obamacare, and then it was a 2-year delay of Obamacare. And so every day, as the Republicans have realized that their position is increasingly untenable, and untenable it is, they have changed their position. So even if the president were even if the president had any ability to control the Republicans in the House of Representatives, which, by the way, the Speaker of the House does not have, as evidenced by the failure of his idea today, even if the president could control the House of Representatives, what would he be negotiating on?
I've got to leave it there. Jim Hines and Marshall Blackburn, both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Coming next, time is running out. What if Washington fails?